The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We'd like to connect you today with Delegate David Toscano. Welcome, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Democratic leader in the House. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
I guess it's pretty tough. Tell us what's going on in the House of Delegates. Just give us the lay of the land. I know you only had about 2 freshman Democratic members elected, so the House is still a vast majority of Republicans.
It's still a vast majority of Republicans, but there's a shift in the Virginia electorate. You know, we now have a Democrat in the governor's mansion, and a lieutenant governor, and the attorney general. The Senate is now 20-20. With the tie vote being broken by the lieutenant governor. So we're picking up some steam, and I think we'll see some changes in the House of Delegates in the years ahead.
Well, how are things in Charlottesville? You were a member of the city council at one time. You were mayor. How is the city doing economically?
My sense is the city is doing very well economically, and the whole region is doing very well. You're seeing some movement away from higher paying jobs to more service-oriented jobs, which I think is a concern for some folks. But there's a lot of construction now going on. There are a lot of new units coming online, housing units for both the university and other sections of the community. The West Main Street corridor has come alive with new development. So I think people are pretty optimistic about the future of the city and the future of the region.
Now, besides the university there, who are some of the other major employers?
Well, you know, you have State Farm Insurance, a major employer. The CFA Institute, which is a place where financial analysts get trained. They just rehabbed the entire Martha Jefferson Hospital complex. That was when Martha Jefferson built their new hospital on Pantops, it left a huge space to be filled in downtown Charlottesville, and the CFA has come in and done a masterful job renovating that building and putting hundreds of people to work downtown in the city.
Now, the University of Virginia is renowned not only within the Commonwealth, but throughout the nation and the world, but tuition has gone up tremendously over the last 10 years. How are we going to deal with that issue?
Well, I mean, part of the tuition increases are a function of people want more for their university experience. And so when you build new facilities, special dorms or dining facilities, are going to show up in the bottom line. But beyond that, we have been consistently underfunding higher education in Virginia, probably for the last 20 years. To his credit, Governor McDonnell had put some additional money in higher ed over the last few years, but we need to do more. We need to generate more academic degrees in Virginia. I think the University of Virginia will be part of that process. But ultimately, you have to invest in higher education if you're going to get the return. And so a lot of us want to see increased spending on higher education.
And one of the ideas you're floating this session deals with pay it forward, pay it later, that kind of a concept?
Well, you know, on the tuition front, there are a lot of people, a lot of youngsters who are discouraged from going to school because they're worried about what kind of debt they're going to have when they come out. The University of Virginia had a program called Access UVA, which was a really great financial aid package for folks. They've had to scale it back because there's not enough money. What I wanted to do is have the legislature do a study about whether it would be possible to extend loans to students and have them pay those loans back to the state over a period of time based on the percentage of their income that they made. Therefore, people who made a higher income would pay their loans back faster. People who made a lower income might pay a lower amount every month and pay their loans off in a different way. We think maybe that would encourage more people to go to school, but there's a lot of study that needs to go into that process.
Now, how are the junior colleges faring, and what role do they play in terms of workforce development?
Well, you know, in Charlottesville area, we have Piedmont Virginia Community College, which really is a a terrific place and really one of the wonderful community colleges in the system as a whole. We have had a lot of success in people being retrained to do different work. They'd go and get some certificate in nursing or some apprenticeship certificate through PVCC. And, but that's a problem too for folks because the tuitions are going up there as well. Again, it points to the need to invest more in higher education, including the community colleges. I think you're going to see more emphasis on workforce development in community colleges over the next few years, because I think that's a lot of people believe that's the best place for people to get retrained.
Now, what about those students who graduate high school but don't deem it necessary or advisable to go to either a junior college or an institution of higher learning? Maybe a vocational educational path is better for them.
I think you're absolutely right. Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody needs to go to college. And yet there's some very good, high-paying work that people can get simply by getting a certificate of some sort. We have a program called K-Tech that's a city-county cooperative program. And that allows people to get certain kinds of certifications. And some of those, you know, say auto mechanics and that sort of thing, pay a pretty decent wage once you get a job. And they are very sophisticated trades. I mean, it requires a lot of understanding of computers to do the job right. So there should be opportunities for folks who don't want to go to school, because we need those folks to do different jobs in our economy.
And of course, that's not to diminish an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, math, and health.
Certainly, yes, we need more engineers, we need more scientists, and we need to try to create them earlier. We need to inspire young people in the 6th grade, in the middle school. We need to inspire young women in the 6th grade, in the middle school, to take up math, take up science, think about the future in ways that maybe they hadn't thought about in the past. We've got some things in Charlottesville and the Albemarle School divisions, 3D printing arrangements where people can learn how to create things just simply by using a computer and a printer. It was unimaginable 10 years ago that we would think about that. But these are things where you can really get youngsters hooked into the science and math and hopefully set them on a path where they might want to pursue that in the future. And
of course, K through 12 is fundamental. Reading, writing, and arithmetic is something everyone needs to deal with, but the standards of learning are under review, if not attacked by some. So what reforms are necessary, in your opinion, in that regard?
Well, in my view, we've been spending too much time teaching to test and put students under too much pressure, and also don't work to do more to encourage their creative abilities. We need to have youngsters who can be creative, and sometimes when you spend so much time on rote memorization teaching to the tests, you lose some of that. So I think what we're going to do this session, at least I hope so, is we're going to cut down on some of the number of tests that have to be given, and then we're going to create a study group that's going to look at the standards of learning over a longer period of time. There is no doubt that we have to have accountability in our educational system. We spend a lot of money on our educational system. We need to know what results we're getting and what we need to change to provide the education that's going to suit these youngsters for the world they're going to face, 10, 15 years from now. But I don't think to do tests all the time makes a lot of sense.
What about early childhood education?
Well, folks in the Chamber of Commerce will tell you that investments in early childhood education will pay dividends through K through 12 and further as people go into the workforce. We haven't been spending the kind of money we need to for quality pre-K education. We don't want to have a situation where people are just babysat. We want them to get some stimulation in the process. So we need to set up a better system to reward those facilities and those homes that are providing that kind of opportunity for youngsters and put some money behind it.
Any opportunities to create virtual classrooms to take advantage of those teachers who can spread their net a little bit wider?
I think you're going to see more and more of that in the next 10 years, and you're going to see it at all levels. You're seeing a lot of it, more of it now in higher education, but you're going to see it in high schools too. There's no substitute for a teacher in the classroom, but there are ways that teacher can complement his or her teaching with this virtual arrangement. And there are ways that youngsters who want to get credit or want to just get the experience of reaching out and exploring different areas and different classes can get that through virtual learning.
Now, during the previous administration, there was an emphasis placed upon the creation of more charter schools. Where does that stand now?
Well, still charter schools are largely a function of the local school divisions. We've got a couple in Albemarle County. Actually, it's kind of interesting. We've got more than most school divisions around the state. But the way these work is that you have to apply to the local school board to get a charter. I think where some of the debate has happened over the last few years is whether we should give tax credits for those youngsters who are sent to private schools. There's been a lot of controversy about that. A lot of us are very concerned that this is going to hurt the public school effort, and I've probably voted against every one of those bills that's come forward so far.
Now, is there any pushback regarding legislation that was passed last year, which now gives the state the authority to take over a failing school district, and also legislation which now will grade schools A to F?
Well, I think there's been huge pushback. The bill that was passed last year that would have allowed allowed the state to take over failing schools. They called it the Opportunity Educational Institute. And run those failing schools was very controversial. I voted against it at the time. I didn't want to take away the local school division's ability to fix a school that had some problems. I never liked to use the word failing school. It connotes things that might not necessarily be the case. Not only that, but I think the folks who are the best suited to deal with the challenges of the schools are there on the ground. So let's try to give them the tools, the skills, so that they can turn around some of these challenged schools rather than focus all of the energy on a bureaucracy in Richmond that controls it from a centralized spot. I never thought that would make sense. We're getting a lot of pushback. There are going to be efforts to strip some of the funding out of that initiative. On the A through F, I understand the rationale for this. The rationale is to try to give parents some idea how their schools are doing. The problem is trying to figure out how to grade the schools. And I think a lot of parents are now saying, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. There are too many factors in there that go into this. So let's get rid of it. Now, I don't think that's going to happen right away, but I think there'll be better provisions written into the law.
The new governor has gotten high marks on his cabinet appointments. I take it you're looking forward to working with the new Secretary of Education.
Well, you know, he knocked it out of the park when he appointed Ann Holton, former judge, former First Lady, done a lot of work in the area of foster care, a lot of work in the area of education. Everybody likes her. Everybody realizes she's a consensus builder. She's not somebody who's going to sort of dictate from the top. It's a tremendous appointment that he made with that. He's done a great job with all of his appointments. We've got people who are coming out of the military who are going to be in charge of Homeland Security for the Commonwealth, people from industry, Brian Moran, who I used to serve with in the House of Delegates for Department of Public Safety, really quality people, and I think they're going to help him, the governor, do his job a lot better.
I believe there were 3 holdovers: finance, health, and agriculture as well.
Yeah, Todd Haymore in agriculture, who's worked for several administrations. Rick Brown, finance. He's been here for years and years and years, and people respect him on both sides of the aisle, so that's really important. And of course, Bill Hazel, who's leading the charge on Medicaid expansion, has so much experience in this area. It's a significant appointment.
Another major bill that was passed last year and will be implemented over the next 20, 30, 40 years is transportation, but already there's a bill to repeal a provision dealing with hybrid vehicles. Apparently that has passed and will likely be signed into law.
I think that will pass. I think there was a lot of concern, even as the bill was moving forward last year, about this so-called hybrid tax. For a lot of us, this did not make much sense. It didn't raise very much money. You're talking about $60 million a year. It wasn't very much money in the scheme of things in a bill that raised $1 billion a year. And it seemed to penalize those people who were driving fuel-efficient vehicles. So it didn't make really much sense. And so there is going to be an effort to repeal it, and I think it probably will be passed and signed.
Another provision in that bill requires action by the Congress in terms of the Marketplace Freedom Act, I think, which will allow the Commonwealth to tax those out-of-state internet retailers that don't currently pay taxes. What happens if the Congress fails to move on that?
Well, if the Congress fails to move on it, the transportation bill allows the wholesale gas tax to rise to make up for the difference. Many of us argued that the Congress is years away from passing that bill. So we put in a fail-safe mechanism to make sure that the money would be there, and it's millions and millions of dollars. So the wholesale gas tax will rise if the Marketplace Equity Act is not passed by Congress.
What are some of the transportation challenges and needs in the Charlottesville area that you see may be fulfilled as a result of the transportation funding measure?
Well, we've got a system of local roads that really needs upgrading. Berkmar Extended, which runs parallel to 29, Hillsdale Drive, which runs parallel to 29. We need to do the Belmont Bridge. We need to have that replaced in downtown Charlottesville. There are a whole host of transportation improvements that can be accelerated because we passed this new bill. The gorilla in the room is the 29 bypass. That's the one that runs west of town. Very controversial, a very expensive road. And as the governor looks for places where he can find money to fund transportation improvements, I wouldn't be at all surprised that they don't look to the 29 bypass and see whether that's a cost-effective road.
Now, one of your colleagues in the Senate suffered a tragedy recently. Mental health reform is on the agenda. It's been on the agenda for quite some time, given what happened at Virginia Tech, which seems eons ago. But it's not only a Virginia problem, it's a nationwide problem. Tell us what is going on and what's likely to happen in terms of mental health reform.
Well, first, the outpouring of love and support for Senator Deeds was incredible. He's a good colleague, a good friend, and we were so dismayed about what happened back in November. He's doing a lot better. I mean, he looks better every day. I think he has committed himself to mental health reform. He's working very hard on those issues down here, so I think that's good for him. And it's good for mental health because this is a huge problem, not just in Virginia, but nationally. When people would come up to me in the aftermath of the tragedy, they inevitably would first express their condolences, but then they would say, and by the way, in my family this, or my nephew this, or whatever. Everybody has a story. There's money in the budget that Governor McDonald put in this budget, some new money for mental health funding. It gets us back close to what the money was, the extra money we put in the aftermath of Virginia Tech. But there are things we can do without money. We can change some of the rules that allow people to be kept longer so that they can be evaluated and protected from themselves or protected against other people. I think we'll see some action on that front. I think we'll see a bill that will pass there. I think we'll see a bill that will have people consult with Western State if they don't have another bed to put someone in. So we have those beds available. And I think you'll see an internet registry of psychiatric beds that will come into play. If you can book your hotel room by the internet, you should be able to find out if there's a bed available in all of Virginia for psychiatric care.
So additional revenue, a database that's easily accessible, and an effort to allow the detention against a person's will for a longer period of time.
I think those will pass. There are always some concerns anytime you detain somebody who's an adult against their will. But most states have a longer period of detention than we do. And I think we'll probably change our laws this session.
Now, you're a member of the Disability Commission. We had talked earlier about the Department of Justice settlement with the Commonwealth of Virginia that will eventually require the closing of some of the training centers around the state. And I know there's still been a lot of angst from parents who have adult children in these facilities.
Right. There is no way around it. There are folks who have gotten used to the notion of a loved one being in one of these training facilities are very worried about the transition into the community. And we have to assure them that we have the resources that are going to make sure that those transitions are seamless and their loved one is protected. Not every single person can be transferred into the community. Some have such serious disabilities that they'll have to be in a center like this. So we cannot get rid of all the centers. But we can move a lot of people who are capable of more independent or community-based living to move into these community facilities, as long as we have the network there that will protect them. And I think for some folks, they've seen their loved ones moved out into the community. They were kind of kicking and screaming as it was happening, and then they'll come back later, 6 months, a year, and say, I never thought I'd say this, but this is the best thing that we could do.
Now, we're also talking about, to the extent those training centers are closed, we're talking about the loss of jobs as well, are we not?
We are. There are going to be new jobs in community-based facilities, but they're not going to be the same as in the training centers. And so we're mindful of that, because we don't, you don't want to create problems in a community because of loss of jobs, whether it's in a training center like that or hospitals or what have you. But we're required by the federal government to move most everybody out of these facilities into community-based facilities. It's a requirement of the court order. So we're going to have to do it anyway. We'll have to try to do it as best we can.
Now, the Affordable Care Act has been under attack since its inception. The U.S. Supreme Court last year upheld the individual mandate, but also allowed the states to determine whether to expand Medicaid coverage. I understand about half the states have done that. 25 others have not. There's a mix of red and blue states who have done it or not. We have a Medicaid commission studying the issue that's chartered through 2016, but I take it that at least on the Democratic side, especially the governor, he wants to make sure that Medicaid is expanded immediately.
On the Democratic side, there's no doubt that we think that between 275,000 and 400,000 Virginians who do not presently have insurance could be placed within Medicaid, and 100% of all of their bills for services rendered for the first 3 years would be paid for by the federal government, and that would drop down to 90%. We think that that's a pretty good deal for our citizens who don't have coverage, and it's a pretty good deal for the state because we're not having to pay.
How much money per year are we talking about?
We're talking about billions of dollars and $1 billion a year. And every day that we do not accept the federal money to do this, we're losing $5 million. We're also putting our hospitals at great risk. If you look at the cuts that they're sustaining, partly because of the Affordable Care Act, but also because of the sequester and other Medicare cuts that are coming their way, they're going to lose between $250 and $500 million in revenue in the next 5 years.
And I think we've already seen at least one hospital that closed.
One hospital closed in Lee County, and a lot of rural hospitals are really being put under the gun because of this. We need to access that money so we can help those hospitals stay the economic engines in their communities that they are at present. It's also estimated if we take the federal money, we'll create 30,000 new jobs in Virginia. So for all of these reasons, to help our citizens, to help our hospitals, and to create these jobs, and to also keep our taxpayer dollars here, because they go other places, other states that accept Medicaid if we don't accept the federal money, we think this is a good deal for Virginia.
Now, you're an attorney, so make the case for the other side.
The case for the other side, and I think this is a legitimate concern, is what happens 5 years out? What happens when the feds say, we can't pay this 90% anymore, if and when they say that? So you have to be concerned about the long-term impact of the budget, on the budget. Right now, Medicaid is about 22% of our budget. It's been rising pretty sharply over the last 10, 15 years. We need reforms in Medicaid because we have to bend that cost curve. Good news is we're putting a lot of those reforms in place. But their concern is that if you look out 5, 10 years, if the feds pull the plug, what are we going to do? Are we going to kick people off of coverage? Are we going to pay for it ourselves out of our state monies? So we have to work through that. We are going to find a Virginia way to do this, though, because we always do.
We're talking about women and children. We're talking about working families, are we not? And to some extent, childless adults would be now covered, would they not?
That's right. Right now, about 50% of all the Medicaid payment coverage is for children. Another 30% is for the aged, elderly, or disabled. So, and that population is taking 70% of the Medicaid dollars. What the expansion would do is it would bring in some more childless adults, people who may be working, may not be working, but they're poor. And right now, their health care of choice is to go to the emergency room. And when that happens, they're boosting up the cost for all of us who are paying for that emergency room service. So we need to move them away from a structure which has them go to an emergency room, try to get them with private doctors where they can go and see somebody for a common cold and it might cost $25 to the state versus going to the ER where it might cost $500.
The other big ticket item on the agenda this session is ethics reform. Unfortunately, the former governor was indicted. He's facing a trial sometime this year. Needed reforms?
Absolutely, we need reforms. I'm unfortunate or unfortunate enough to be put on the ethics subcommittee. So we're working through the bills. And you know, it's very interesting. It's very easy to talk in concept about reforms and embrace them conceptually. But when you start writing it down on a piece of paper and trying to figure out what's unintended consequences might be created by this kind of language, it takes a long time. I think there's no doubt we're going to have some prohibition on gifts, both the solicitation and the acceptance of gifts. The governor has now put in an administrative order, says you can't accept gifts over $100. We're going to have a gift ban. I don't know whether it'll be $100 or $250. But that doesn't solve the problem. All that says is you can't take the Rolex. The question becomes, what about other things? What about meals? What about travel to some conference somewhere? There are a lot of complexities here that's going to take some time to work through, but we'll get something at the end.
So definitions are very important, and the amount of the cap is very important as well.
That's right. I mean, you know, I'd love to go to the Masters and have a lobbyist pay for it, but I don't think it's right. So, you know, should prohibit something like that. And, you know, it takes some working with our colleagues to understand what's appropriate and what's not.
Great. We'll leave it there. Thank you for being with us, Delegate David Toscano, the leader of the Democrats in the House of Delegates.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.